I've probably had 7 or 8 things in my life that were enough to singularly destroy a person, but I'd just not dealt with any of them. Each day I woke up, I felt crap. It was a challenge to get up out of bed. The only thing that kept me centred at the time, which I'm a little bit ashamed to say really, was the cycling. For me, that was a massive escape. I used to go out at night, 2 hours, pitch black, but it centred me, and it went home and my woes of that day had been forgotten about. I never thought about me, it was making sure everyone else was getting what they wanted, because I thought that was the way to make people happy, make myself happy probably. Parked up in Sandy Lane in my car, and that day that was me done. I was tapping out. I'd had enough. I'd convinced myself, I think, that everyone would be better off without me at that time. Weirdly enough, bloody REM song "Everybody Hurt" comes on, and the first image I had in my head was my lad's face. That was the hardest bit, seeing his face. I thought I was being a good dad, and I wasn't, because I thought they'd be better off without me.
I didn't lean into those vulnerable moments. I put them on a golf tee and smashed them as far away as possible.
Yeah. The more I spoke to people, the easier things got. I went to see a lady in Chester, she's got a mindfulness and well-being, and I went to see her, and that was really powerful, because that sort of undid things that I had no idea I was holding on to, stuff from when I was a kid. I've spent so much of my life just pleasing everybody else and making sure that everyone else around me was happy and had a good time, whereas now it's a case of opening up for us all really, and realising that it's not a bad thing to say, mate, I don't feel great in a minute. Sometimes the biggest impact you make is just by being around someone, and being close to them. There will be times where you won't have the answers, but you've just got to try and learn from each one of those.
Hello, I'm Ed, and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast series, Tackling It Together, brought to you by Little Blackbird, where we will be having open, honest and important conversations with some inspirational guests. Hello and welcome back to Tackling It Together, the podcast where we speak to real people, get real stories and real perspectives. And today we're in the presence of Kev, my pal Kev. How you doing?
Very well, mate. You?
Yeah, good.
Good.
How's the leg? Recently had the cast off, so you've had a leg break, but you're coming back.
Yeah, so it's cast all off, and it's now a case of gym, and all the hard work begins now, seemingly. And the calf at the minute looks like a kid's calf, but we'll see how that goes.
Give it 6 months, you'll be like Jack Grealish calf. So we're really lucky to have Kev here today. So Kev, I know you probably 5 or 6 years ago, I think. I met you on the rugby field. Yeah. Caldy, away.
It was.
You know what's coming in.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
It was an over 35s rugby game. It was a Friday night. It was wet. We got thumped. Yeah. But you delivered a tackle in the corner, and I think it was the second row, and you had no right to make that tackle. Can you remember it?
I can't. Yeah, I just remember just seeing this big lad running towards. But that's the story of my life. It was always somebody bigger than me running towards me, and he wasn't getting past me that day. He was having it.
I can still hear the connection, the thud of you tackling into touch. From that, we've kind of known each other throughout the rugby club. Yeah. So today we're going to get your perspective from work. So been in the building trade, how many years?
Over 20 years now. So it's sort of bit right from being an apprentice right the way through now. So done me time. That's for sure. Yeah.
You've forgotten more than I know. So we're going to get the perspective of that, and I know a lot of that, running your own business, got a thriving business now, but there's been some rough patches along the way, and that's what we're going to get into with this conversation, because I know a lot of people connect with that. You're a massive advocate for mental health, male mental health, big supporter of charities that promote that. You and I are both connected with that. We're also connected with Journeys of Our Kids. Yeah. We've just been speaking previously about spending time in Alder here with our little ones, and particularly talking around the vulnerability side as a dad. Yeah. So we're going to get lots of different perspectives today. But when I reached out to you, I think, didn't I, a couple of weeks ago? Yeah,
it was, just to see if I'd be interested in having a chat, really. And it's kind of opened the doors, and
And I sent you a voice note, because that's how I communicate these days. I just can't write. But you came back straight away saying, I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
For me, it's getting us blokes to realise that it's not just you. I think that was the biggest thing for me. Is I've spent so much of my life just pleasing everybody else and making sure that everyone else around me was happy and had a good time, and seeing me as fun time Kev. Whereas now it's a case of opening up for us all really, and realising that it's not a bad thing to say, mate, I don't feel great at the minute, or can we go for a coffee or a beer, and just see where it goes. It's that's the big thing for me is opening up really.
And how are you doing now?
Better now. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have me bad days and I have me good days, but I think I'm a lot more aware of me bad days coming, and I sort of put things in place then to not allow me to sort of go into a black hole. I mean, for me, May time is always one of my worst parts of the year, because rugby finishes, coaching finishes with the kids, and then you kind of, you don't have that connection with your mates and things. So that's one period, and then sort of December time, the winter for me is a bad time because there's no sun, and everything seems gloomy. So now we put things in place to make sure that I'm kept busy, I'm kept active. The fitness side for me is a big part of it, although it might not necessarily look at it now but it just keeps my head centred, and tries to keep a balanced view on stuff really.
Yeah, but prior to your leg, you've been playing rugby actively for a lot of years.
Yeah, not as a forward either, much to everyone's shock and dismay. But yeah, for a short, fat lad, I could still run quite quick.
And
so.
You still can.
Yeah.
Once you get back on that pitch. Right, so we're going to get into this, and I know you're an open book, and we've got a lot of connections, but we're just going to get into this because I know that your perspective will really connect with people involved in the construction industry, anyone that's got their own business and pressures, people from a parental perspective of not being in control of situations, and you are now in the position of your life where you can articulate. Maybe similar to me. Well, that's probably why we're connected. We can articulate, we can reflect back from a rational state of mind. So that's what I want to get into. I know 2015 was the dark period. So take me back to before 2015. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing work-wise and what was life like back then. So
back then I was, I'd actually gone into a state agency for a number of years. So when I think it was at 21, I snapped another injury, cruciate ligament, playing football, and at the time was out of work, so went and got a job as a trainee estate agent, and I was pretty good at it, did all right with it. I was good at communicating with people, and stayed at that for a good 10 to 15 years in it, and did okay. I got to management point of, with a corporate group, went over to a couple of independents, and I think the pressure was, for me, was just about making sure that everyone else was okay. It was to the detriment of myself, to the detriment of my family, and to be fair, at the time, how my wife put up with me, and it is beyond me. When I look back now, I don't know how she never left me back then. But yeah, it was just a culmination of pressure and just taking everything on. And the next challenge was, right, well, tomorrow's tomorrow. If somebody needs something, I'm going to do it for them, and I'll help them if I can. And I never really said no. I never thought about me. It was making sure everyone else was getting what they wanted, because I thought that was the way to make people happy, make myself happy probably. And yeah, so sort of prior to 2015, outwardly I probably had a good life. Everybody looking in at me, it's like, Kev's doing all right. He's punching above his weight with his missus. He's got a lovely family. He's got a good job, nice car. But behind that screen, it was just a mess. There was each day I woke up, I felt crap. It was a challenge to get up out of bed. The only thing that kept me centred at the time, which I'm a little bit ashamed to say really, was the cycling. That was, for me, that was a massive escape. I used to go out at night, 2 hours, pitch black, but it centred me, and I went home and my woes of that day had been forgotten about, and then I'd tackle the next day. So, and then 2015 hit. I was parked up in Sandy Lane in my car, and that day that was me done. I was tapping out. I'd had enough. I'd convinced myself, I think, that everyone would be better off without me at that time.
Okay.
So it was just like, yeah, done, you know. And weirdly enough, bloody REM song "Everybody Hurt" comes on, and the first image I had in my head was my lad's face, and then that sort of elaborated into he was stood at my funeral, and that was it. That was my I'm not doing this. I can't. Probably did. Looking back now, didn't have the courage to do it, because I do think now it does take courage to force yourself to go through something like that, but it's a braver, stronger person to not do it. And I think if you can get your mind to that point, and you know, and for me it was REM and my lad, and that was me. Then I was back to the office. Job was done, and yeah, and back into the Countess and away from there really.
Bloody hell. Was it, when you said you could see Will and that, you could see, how vivid was that?
It was
in your head?
At the time, it was just his it was his nose, his eyes, that didn't see past this part of his face really, the cheekbones, and then it just sort of opened up, and then he was sat there, stood there in a suit, and that was it. That was done. Man. Yeah, that was tough. Really tough.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't know, we've known each other 5 years, but we haven't,
we're
doing this now, but we haven't spoke on that level. And
to be fair, I don't even think I've spoken to my wife on that point. Like, she knows where I was with it, but just that in itself, really, that was the hardest bit, seeing his face. Yeah. And then when everything I did, I just seemed to cry. I just couldn't stop crying. You know, one of the lads from work at the time took me to the Countess, and you know, the guys at the triage nurse, she was brilliant. She took me straight through, went and sat in the psych team, and we sat in a room for, felt like forever, but it was 2-3 hours, maybe even longer. And the lad Ed that was with me was just the best person to have at that point, because he knew when to not say a word, which was most of that time we were in there, but the times when something was said, it just, it was like someone giving you a hug. And I don't think he'll ever realise how much of an impact he made on me that day by saying very little. And that was a big wow moment for me, really.
It's mad that, isn't it? Because you were saying before about when you were struggling, jumping on the bike was your opportunity to go and switch off. But
yeah.
What was the difference between jumping on the bike but having Ed there, and sometimes he didn't even say anything? But he was there.
It was just because nothing was having to be thought about. You know, there wasn't a case of me having to think about something that made him feel all right, or you know, it was just a case of you don't need to say anything. You just, sometimes you don't. You know, sometimes the biggest impact you make is just by being around someone, you know, and being close to them. And you know, he's a proper lad's lad, if that's the right kind of phrase. But you know, that day he was a proper hero to me, really. I don't think I've ever told him that either. So yeah.
Well, let's hope he watches this.
yeah.
No doubt he'll be tapping him for a pint.
Yeah.
But thanks for sharing that as well.
No, you're welcome. Yeah.
You know, that's why we're doing this. I know that people will be watching this now and connecting with that. It's about those moments, and I mean, I shared with you before, I lost my pal just over 2 years ago now, and I firmly believe he had that thought in his head that people would be better off without him.
Yeah.
But you can now reflect back on that.
Yeah.
And that music and that visual image snapped you out of that.
Yeah.
How do you now feel when you hear that song?
Warm inside. That's the only. I mean, it's not a song that I've played a lot, to be fair, because it does. I mean, it can take you back to the wrong place, you know, and that's the sort of counterproductive part of it. Is yes, look at your past and sort of embrace it, but equally sometimes you've got to leave that alone. And it's not a song I play a lot. If I'm feeling a bit moody or down, then it might be something I can play, because they don't have to be in perfect key or tone in my little car. But yeah, hearing it back now, it does make me, it fills me with warmth, really, because it's like that was the turning point, or what felt like the turning point at the time.
And it sounds like we don't hear this often, but you had a good hospital experience. They
Yeah.
sorted you out, and they were proactive with you.
Yeah, and the triage nurse, she was brilliant. Weirdly enough, I'd been in a few times with various injuries and knocks and what have you, and it had been this triage nurse, and it was a bit of a jovial at first when I first went in, as you know, what's wrong? And I just broke down, and she was like, and she just swept me through, and yeah, for me, it was a good experience to sort of front it, but then it's that bit beyond, really. It's that bit after that you need, and that was where then opening up to Kerry and sort of going through things with her, that was the one where all of a sudden my shoulders didn't feel like this. They weren't slouching. Everything felt a little bit brighter, and I wasn't scared in telling people. You know, all my mates at the time had no idea what I was going through, what I was doing, or what I wasn't doing. You know, and we just all went out and fronted it with them all and said, look, boys, this is the situation for me, and they were brilliant. You know, like everybody you find, it's the minute you say it, well, yeah, I felt a bit shit. I know what it's like, and it was just made things easier. The more I spoke to people, the easier things got. The more sense stuff made, and like we talked before about everyone believing that everyone else would be better off without you. When you just sort of approach that with people, that you're really not. You know, you're in their life, they want you in their life, and that really resonated with me. Really, it was, you know, these boys want me around, my wife wants me around, my kids want me around, and all of a sudden this sort of narrow-mindedness that I had, that everybody would be better off without me, was the complete opposite. You know, you hear it all the time where, you know, somebody has taken their life or what have you, and the families are crushed, the friends are crushed, and like with you, Mikey, you know, it's like, what could I have done? You know, could I have stopped it? And and the sad part is, the only way is for us to just talk about it, and you know, and that's, for me, that's why I'm big behind the Loose Heads movement, you know, with what you do as well. I think it's so powerful, and that can just be as simple as a handshake, cuddle, you know, a dig in the ribs, whatever it may be. But just know that it's not just you. You know, everyone goes through this, I think. You know, and some people can deal with it, and a lot of people, most people, I don't think can.
It's mad, isn't it, that simple task of just offloading. But when you shared that with your loved ones, your people around you, you shared that utter vulnerable moment of, you know, I believe you're best off without me.
Yeah.
What response do you get?
It was almost a relief, I think, for Kerry, that I'd finally admitted that it was an issue, because she'd said for me for a long time prior to me breaking that there was something I needed, you know, there was something not right, and she'd always said it, but I kind of brushed it off, and no, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me. So she was the biggest part of it behind the scenes, really, and you know, and like stood holding me for 15 minutes just so that I could feel that connection and feel that warmth, you know. And it sounds silly, but when you take your partner for, or I was taking her for granted for a long period of time, and being able to just hold her and her hold me, that was amazing and massive.
A human connection.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
So looking back, well, go from that 2015, so you meet someone, you get proactive. What was the process then?
It was a lot of it was driven by Kerry. You know, she didn't, don't get me wrong, she didn't push me out and, you know, and sort of back me into a corner. She was just really proactive, you know, not letting me hide away. You know, we started to front things, you know, and It was a case of being honest with her, with the kids. I mean, I thought I was being a good dad and I wasn't, you know. Looking back now, I wasn't being a good dad to them, because I thought they'd be better off without me, and that, for me, that was the thing that I wanted to change massively. So there wasn't a phenomenal amount of support behind the scenes from NHS or whoever people may or may not see that they need to go to. But once you start looking, there's things out there. And I went to see a lady in Chester. She's got a mindfulness and well-being, and I went to see her, and that was really powerful, because that sort of undid things that I had no idea I was holding on to, stuff from when I was a kid, that again had never really factored into my peripherals. But the minute she started talking to me about it, and a lot of my way of dealing with not talking was pretty much institutionalized as a kid. You know, it was just easier to not have an argument with somebody, so we won't say, well, what's on your mind. Just avoid that confrontation. And she sort of really drilled into me with that. And then sort of with the mindfulness, she sort of turned my way around to thinking, rather than thinking about 1,000,001 things at any one time, it's like, you know, this is all I'm going to be doing today. This is what I'm going to give everything to the time that we've got together. And not perfect, but as things do that, then it just makes a little bit more sense. So yeah.
I seen you do a speech to the under-14s a couple of weeks ago at the end of season 2. It was interesting because you were so like authentic with them and inspiring with them, and the way you've led that team, you and the other coaches. It's really interesting how you reflect on that and to see where you are now.
Yeah.
And to see that strength that you have and your ability to be vulnerable with others,
yeah.
You know, at an appropriate level.
Yeah.
Like be vulnerable with the kids, not to tell them as much as what they need to know.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in thinking, looking back now, you've mentioned fun time, Kev.
Yeah.
You've mentioned pressure. You've mentioned stress. You've mentioned shame. I don't know whether it was in this or in previous conversations with me. What were the key kind of triggers or catalysts to that decline leading up to 2015?
I think it was just a culmination of it all. I think that was the sort of, from speaking to the guys in the site team and speaking to the lady with regards to the mindfulness was I probably had 7 or 8 things in my life that were enough to singularly destroy a person. But I'd just not dealt with any of them. And then I think that next part of my life was very much, right, well, it's going to be a turning point for you here. You're either going to carry on, be miserable, and potentially you are going to do something stupid, or how I seen it at the time was as I broke, and everything that I'd bottled up for the last 20, 25 years just all started to come out, and once I'd allowed that to happen, things did feel a lot different. I used to go cycling to just centre my head, and that moment that I broke, I didn't ride a bike again for 18 months because I didn't need to. It wasn't a case of hiding from anything. It was, right, well, I don't need to go out and take care of my brain because my brain's fine because I've told everyone how I feel today. And then I stopped worrying about if it was going to upset somebody or make somebody annoyed. It'd only be for that day, and then you're rebuilding, then, aren't you?
Yeah.
So.
And what about vulnerability? Because we've spoke quite a lot about this, and it's pivotal to men's mental health.
Yeah.
Somewhere around vulnerability. So if we look back to pre-2015, how did you view vulnerability, and what did you do to harness it versus now?
I think back then I just used to be brash, and I think because I was that fun time Kev, like I convinced myself and probably everybody around me that I was invincible. I'd do stupid sporting challenges just to prove that I was macho, or that I could do it, or that it was going to be bigger and better. Whereas now it's not like that now. It's more a case of seeing what each day what you've got to overcome, and that might just be, for some people, might just be getting out of bed. You know, and everything with my leg. There was times where, you know, just going to the loo was my challenge for the day. So I stopped drinking a lot of water just to aid that a little bit. But yeah, it's a culmination, I think, of so much in my life that I just didn't front at all.
Hello, hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, please engage with us on whatever platform you're listening. Leave us a review, rate the show, subscribe, a comment. Please engage with us so that we can keep these podcasts as on point as possible and keep you happy. Take care, all the best, keep smiling. Looking back from a rational point of view now,
Yeah.
pre-tough times, what do you think the key kind of triggers were?
I think, truthfully, it was a culmination of everything. At sort of from being a kid right the way through. It was a military background. Dad was in the army, so it wasn't regimentally strict, but you know, Dad was strict. You know, and back then it was like you wouldn't argue with your mum and dad, you know, you like the kids do now, certainly with my two anyway. But you know, it was easier to avoid conflict and confrontation because you just got told what was happening and that was it, you know. And every 2 years we'd get moved to a new camp or a new country, and you've got to make new friends, and you don't really have a say in that. And that was probably the earliest part of my troubles, probably, because I learned from that very moment that, you know, you don't address your problems, you just bury it to the back of your head, get on with it, and tomorrow's tomorrow. I think that rational wise now, that certainly goes right back to being a kid, to be fair.
And what's that connection between that behaviour that you got as a kid to Fun Time Kev?
I think it goes cap in hand, because it was, you know, you don't argue, you just do, and then you become versed on, I can't say what I think, you know, because I know if I say what's in my mind, it's going to upset someone. So the way I dealt with it was, right, well, I'll go the other way and I'll be the person that no one can argue with, no one can be upset with, because I'll just do everything that everyone else wants, you know, and that'll make them happy, and in turn, in my mind, it was making me happy, you know, and the reality is it wasn't, you know, it was just another little nail getting hammered in, and I just rolled with it and then the next problem then would be, you know, whatever else that you would face, you know, and everything, obviously with hope, and with a heart and stuff. So it was all those bits, and I remember one of the doctors saying to me at the time that those little incidents that you'd had throughout your life were probably one or two of them were enough to break people. But I'd just become that good at burying everything. I probably come across quite an emotionless book, really. You know, it's just there was just nothing coming back from me, and you know, that bit, like I think we touched on before with Kerry, that's where that was the first time I think I massively let her down as a husband. You know, is that she wanted me to be so vocal and to talk to, because she's very good at it, you know, and her family they dealt with it differently. But that was the big one really for me, was I'd let her down as a husband, and then, you know, it sort of, once I'd addressed it, it then started to help, that's for sure.
So it sounds like you're talking about shame there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you know, I was a terrible husband, I was a terrible dad. You know, and would I have changed it? 100% I would have changed it. Looking back now, I'd have had a different conversation. You know, I'd have been a different person. I wouldn't strive to please everybody else, and I think that's what we're so keen to do nowadays, is make sure that everyone else is okay.
Well, I was thinking there when you were talking about, you know, I wouldn't have those conversations. It sounds like you were a yes man.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think everyone that knows me from early parts that would exactly how they describe me, and I do purely just to make it better for everybody else. You know, and that was to the detriment of, you know, my family. You know, and that's the bit I'll always have to have that in the back of the head that, you know, that was my doing, but grow from that really. You know, and not be that like that again.
Have you ever read any stuff by Brené Brown?
No.
Oh, I'll lend you the book.
Okay, yeah.
So I read this just after. So we are also, you and I know, but for the listeners and the viewers, we are connected that we both had kids in older here with heart conditions that needed a lot of input in order to save their lives. Both of our kids had conditions that were non-compatible with life and they needed intervention. Yours happened a few years before mine. Mine was at COVID time, but shortly after that I read this book because I was really struggling with shame.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that's what it was. I just thought it was something that made me feel really sad, but looking back now, I now know it was shame. Brené Brown is a shame researcher, an American lass, and she wrote a book called Daring Greatly to be Vulnerable.
Yeah.
I remember reading this and it just started to really, I was crying my eyes out, chapter 4, because he was just talking about those vulnerable moments and how you now need to lean into them.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know about you, but for me growing up, I didn't lean into those vulnerable moments. I put them on a golf tee and smashed them as far away as possible.
Yeah.
Put them in the back of the closet, put them under the rug. Whereas now, it's interesting when you talk about shame, because you've got a moment that you feel shameful about.
Yeah.
I've got a moment. My moment is sitting by my boy's bed in hospital, and fundamentally on my own, COVID times, my wife wasn't there, she was in another hospital. Lockdown 1 had just happened, so there was no one there. That had a pretty big panic attack the day before because the isolation hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
I couldn't deal with it. I realised 36 years of life, I was on my own.
Yeah.
There was no random people I could latch onto and talk shit to.
Yeah.
There was just me and a two-day-old little boy where I couldn't even see his face. He was just covered in tubes, and a nurse on the other side of the bed, and just buzzers going off everywhere. And my thought was, I fundamentally believed that he would not pull through. And I was like, there's no way it can happen. And it just kept growing and growing and growing, to the point where we went to a room, and when we came back and he was still there and he was going strong, and that shame just sat with me and grew and grew and grew for months and months. Whereas I thought, I can't believe that I didn't back him.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that you've not backed him, it's that you as the dad, you couldn't do anything about it. That, for me, that was sort of tying in with hope. That was what it was for me. You know, it was, you're looking at this little person that, you know, is part of you, that's in a really, really bad way. And, you know, you as the dad, you want to fix that, and you couldn't, you know, and you've got to look at it that you being there is what's giving him the strength, whether you know truly think that or not. That for me, that's what you've got to take away from that. And you know, he's a cracking lad. He's got such a personality on him. You know, I'm assuming most of that's from Claire, but you know, it's that's the hard
sharp
part.
Tongue, I think he's got that from me.
Yeah, that's the hard bit. Is you're having to stand away from that, and you cannot do anything other than be there. And it's on as it was, it's on him to get stronger, and he has, you know. And
But looking back, I really struggle with that vulnerability. I describe it as sitting by his bed and like someone had literally gaffer taped my hands together,
Yeah.
and I couldn't move them. I didn't want to pick him up because I felt like I would break him or move a tube. And I don't know about you, for your situation, that was the total opposite to what I expected, and that was our second kid. But looking back now, that was the total opposite to what I thought what I should be doing. I should be like, it's fine, I should be running out and saying he's going to pull it, but in the head it was just this niggle and niggle. And it wasn't just a glass half empty. It was like, based on everything that I'm seeing here, I just can't see how it can happen.
Yeah.
But then again, you were around people where there was, like, Claire's mindset was unbelievable. And the surgeon's mindset was absolutely unbelievable. Like, no matter what's going on outside this hospital, we get him fixed.
Yeah.
We don't panic. I remember him saying, you'll be the first, if I'm concerned, you'll be the first people I'll talk to.
Yeah.
It was like 15 cardiologists scratching their head, and he was like, we don't panic.
Yeah.
And I was just crying my eyes out, and I said before, I remember an anaesthetist just coming over and putting his arm around and almost giving us a kidney jab and said, come Ed, sort yourself out.
Yeah.
You've got a magician working on him here, and if there's anything wrong, he'll fix it. And I didn't have a clue what vulnerability meant until that moment.
Yeah.
Like, I'd experienced grief, I'd lost my dad a few years before that, but I'd never ever experienced that wave of you are not in control here.
Yeah.
And I think for us as men, as fathers, business owners, whatever that is, what do we need to learn as men about vulnerability moving forward?
I think vulnerability is, you're always going to feel vulnerable, you know, and sometimes it's taken out of your hands. Like, you know, for me, it was probably the same with you, with Charlie, is you're looking over that bed and you can't do anything about it. And somebody once said to me, unless you've got it in your hands, you can't control it. And that's helped me deal with the vulnerability of life a little bit more, you know, is if I can stop it happening, I will, or if I can do something about it and it's in my control, I will. But you're going to be vulnerable, you know, there will be times where you won't have the answers, you know, but you've just got to try and learn from each one of those, you know. And with Hope being in hospital, we found, you know, we got told at 26 weeks when Kerry was pregnant that we had 1% chance of Hope being born and surviving, and that was my vulnerable moment, you know. And that was something that they offered us a termination, and we'd always said right the way through that we'd never do anything. If there was anything wrong, we'd front it, you know. And Hope came along and she was born, and all of a sudden that 1% just went out the window. You know, she was this person, and she was making the decision that she was going to be here, and all me and Kerry could do was be there for her. And that sort of reinstilled you're going to feel vulnerable, because as dad, particularly, you want to fix it. You know, you want to have all the answers, and you don't want to show that you're upset or because you're trying to be strong all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and once you come away from that and start embracing each part of the process, then it becomes a bit easier. You know, I had another one when the night before Hope's heart surgery, which every time I talk about it gets me. And that night, that was the last time I knew I was never going to see her with a scar on her chest. And that gets me every time. It takes the wind out of me every single time. And that was 15 years ago, you know. And I still feel that vulnerability just at a thought. And that's not physically happening now. You know, she's in control of her life. You know, we're lucky she's now being discussed about adult care and the changeover from older hay. But those vulnerable times where, you know, I couldn't do anything about it, but I still feel like that today.
Do you ever get those moments where it just hits you like a wave, maybe when you're looking at her or looking at Will? And it might just be a trivial thing, like the doing out.
Yeah.
But does it hit you like that emotion?
Yeah, massively. And it's the simplest little thing. I mean, like on Saturday, you know, watching the boys mill around, and, you know, Charlie's 5, and he's running around the pitch with 14, 15, 16-year-old boys, and he's being one of the boys. That really got me. Yeah. Because he was the boys' mate. Yeah. And vice versa. And it's the same with Hope. You know, Hope has such a positive outlook on life. You know, she doesn't stop doing anything because she's not allowed or she's not capable. She'll give everything a bloody good go. And like, I think anyone that knows Hope, you realise that she's the glue that holds us together behind the scenes, really. Because if she can deal with what she deals with on a daily basis, then you've got to snap to, really, and you've got to listen and open your ears a little bit. And you're probably like that with Charlie. Yeah.
It's just like the resilience that they show, and what it adds to you.
And it's honest from the kids. You know, we kid ourselves, but they can't be anything other than honest with you. You know, and those times where Hope will just come home and just give you a hug, like, they're the best times in my day. You know, is getting a hug off, and Will still does that now as well. You know, it does make you realise that, do you know what, life's pretty good when you've got them around you.
Yeah.
It really does, you know, and your vulnerability at any one point in time will lead to the strength in them, you know, and like we touched on before, how can they improve it going forward, the kids? I think if they can just take a measure of what we've tried to do and do the next 10%, it's like the next rung on the ladder, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, their generation is going to be stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, I think that's positive.
And that's how we'll start to change these horrendous statistics. You're right, you were alluding to we had a game at the weekend and my Charlie was playing with your Will and other little kids, and when I said about that book before, chapter 4 talks about vulnerability. We naturally want to bash it away, put it in the closet. But she talks about leaning into it. And I had that on Saturday. When I looked up on that mound, they just scored a try. I was blown out my arse, no oxygen. 40-year-old rugby player just trying to keep hold of my rugby boots. And I remember having my hands on my knees and I looked up and I saw your Will and I saw my kids, Charlie and Ava, my little girl who's 2 years old, doing a roly-poly down the hill. And Charlie got up and I looked at him and he said, all right, and he went, go and get him, Dad. And I was like, I'm knackered, son, I can't. But it was those moments in it where you just think, oh, like they made it.
Yeah.
You know? And I didn't even get up for the restart. I was still under the sticks because I thought, I'm just going to stay in this moment for as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to break it.
Yeah.
If it means 14 lads have to do the restart on their own, they can. But I just held that stare with him. And then he sacked me off. He went back up to the top of the hill, but I just thought, wow, you know, he's ready. He's come through and he's thriving. And that's probably why I stayed at the club till about 7 o'clock and just watched him run round. But for me, that's those moments where you just lean into it. What I would have done previously was just like get a grip, run on and miss that moment. Whereas now, I think for us, it's about understanding when those hit you, just sit in them because that's what you've earned. You've earned those rights to think, I'm not that anti-model now. I'm not that was where I was, but now from doing a bit of graft and working on your head, I'm not that anti-model. I deal with things in a different way now. Yeah. And we lean, you know, we learn so much from our role models. I never thought my role models would be my kids. I was always told your role models are the ones older than you. Whereas actually my 2 kids and my family, my wife are my absolute role models based on their mindset and how they just get their head down and deal with things. So I think it's something around vulnerability and leaning into it. Leaning into those moments. You said it before about fronting it. Having those conversations, telling the under 14s that you've got to cut this stuff at source, talk about it before it builds. And looking back now for you, you mentioned about I was a yes man. But now you said this metaphor, if I have not got that in my hands, I can't do anything about it. So what do you do as opposed to being a yes man? What's your philosophy now moving forward? So
it's be honest with you. Like I say it to the lads all the time, is do you first. You know, in any part of you feeling crap and downbeat, you've got to look after you first. Everyone else will be all right, and it might hurt to hear that you're not the one that holds them up all the time. But do you, and once you've done you can then be a better person for them that are in front of you. You know, I find that with stepping into the coaching role with the boys here is trying to make them better human beings. You know, and realising that you do have weaknesses in life. Everybody does. But you can change somebody's belief just by putting your arm around them. You know, and we see that with our 14-year-old boys, 13, 14-year-old boys are so mature, and they get a bad rap, really. You know, we've got some really good young men in our team, and it's not because they're good rugby players, it's because they're good people. You know, and they know when somebody's down and they know to put their arm around them and know when to have a giggle. They'll drive me mad at times when they won't listen and they want to do things their way, but I think, like you said before, we if we look at them, we can learn a lot from them. And more often than not, they're just honest. We're not. You know, we're always trying to think of how it are perceived or what it looks like. Whereas no, that's crap. Don't do that. That's stupid. And we've had some, disciplining incidents within the team, and we just nipped it in the butt. And we've put consequences in place. So if the lads do step out of line, then they're punished. Not in a physical, traumatic way, in a way that you realise that when you go out there in the big wide world, you're being horrible to somebody or nasty to somebody. That can change things, but if you're positive with them and encouraging with them, then you'll get a lot from it, and you'll get a lot from life with that, really. Yeah. And we're fortunate. We've got 42 boys that turn up every week to be around us, and for me, it's a pleasure to be around them, really, and that's the big one.
I can see that from you as coaches. You get just as much from it as
they do. Yeah. I think we touched on that in sort of as the season was coming to a close. Was we as a coaching group, we found that separation from each other and from them made our May miserable. So this May we went the complete opposite. Again, little word of wisdom from Adi was just meet up as coaches, and we went to the driving range. And
oh, did you do that?
Yeah, we did it. Yeah, and it was brilliant. It was really uplifting, and it was something to look forward to. So we kept that connection all the way through, and now we're back pre-season. And it was a proper laugh on Wednesday. No rugby was played. It was purely fitness and seeing if we could make any of the boys be pre-season sick. But fair play to them, they did well. Not one of them yacked. So but it was nice to have them back and see their little faces again, really.
Yeah, and that must have helped you as well, because you said previously May is a tough month when it all stops.
And it was sort of seeing all the other coaches, and obviously the kids come along, but it was nice that we still had that bit of a laugh, and and for the most part we enjoy each other's company, I think.
There'll be moments.
Yeah, there is moments, yeah. But it's nice to see, and I think that's so important, is don't cut yourself away. Yeah.
The last thing that we do when we ask every guest is for the little blackbird worm of wisdom. Now, you've dropped a few in, but what advice would you give anyone maybe in the construction industry or someone who's a father? Over to you. What is your little blackbird worm of wisdom?
I think the thing for me, it sort of resonates a lot, is the worst 24 hours in your day is only 24 hours. So every problem you face, you just deal with it in that time, and then you move on. And that was somebody once said that to me, and it just really stuck. Is to go with that mindset of do the best version of you in that 24 hours. Some people will like it, other people won't like it, but then it's another day then, and it starts all over again.
Have you watched Vinnie Jones in the country?
Some of it, yeah.
Started watching it last week, and every morning he gets up, makes his bed, and his belief is that even if you've got a shocking day, if you've had the worst day, you get to come home to a nice clean bed, then you go again. Yeah. So that probably links to that 24 hours philosophy.
It does. There's so many out there that that you could sort of hinge on and listen to. There was one I heard the week that surrounding yourself in the right environment. He said, because if you put an egg in boiling water, you'll make it hard. But if you just crack an egg, it's nice and soft inside. And that was quite a powerful one as well, for an American that said that as well, believe it or not.
Kev, cheers, pal.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the time, bud.
Thank you. No, thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed tackling it together, brought to you by Little Blackbird. If you did, then please hit the subscribe button. Give us a follow on our socials, Little Blackbird Limited. Also, please give us a like and comments on any thoughts that you may have. Let's get these important topics out there and encourage some meaningful, authentic conversations. See you next time. Cheers, and remember, keep smiling.